Welcome back. We are in video 10 of this series on the nLight nPWDMX snapshot controller powered by Pathway Connectivity Solutions. And today we're going to concentrate very much with the output ports of the snapshot controller and how they can act as an RDM controller in conjunction with Pathscape. Now I'll mention one more time, as we've seen in a lot of the documentation, you will not use 5-pin coming out of a RDM enabled controller through an input port to an output port. Only output ports support RDM. The input ports do not. If you are going to be using RDM, you will be using Pathscape as the RDM controller. Now, remote device management, what does that mean? It means you don't have to get a ladder out to go up and change dip switch settings or menu settings on the back of your fixtures. All of those settings, plus some sensors like temperature settings and lamp hours and things like that, you will be able to ask the luminaire, and when the DMX line is quiet, it will respond. So that's how remote device management works, and all path ports and the output ports on the nPWDMX will work with Pathscape as an RDM controller. So to that vein, let's open up our snapshot controller here, and I will go down to port A, which I already know is enabled as an output port. Therefore, it may be enabled, and it is by default as RDM enabled here. And once I do that, I can right click on the device and I can say discover the RDM devices on this port. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to explain the demo case and this LED tile we call the Lambda tile that Pathway Connectivity built for our engineering purposes and specifically for this demo case. It is not a product, it is a training and test tool. Therefore, it not only has an RGB LED to look like a light, it has a green identify LED, which you'll see in a second, and it has an amber RDM LED, and it has a red soft button LED. So when I hit RDM Discover, you're going to see a bunch of the amber LEDs come on, and that's saying I am seeing RDM packets. I'm seeing RDM packets. And you would see there the number of devices and the countdown requests of how many RDM messages are remaining to get all of the information for the 16 RDM devices that we found online. 4x4 grid, 16 fixtures. We can also see the last time that a full discovery had been done. Now, since we have found these devices and they are children of the port, we can now go to the RDM view, which is a friendlier column format that shows the devices, and currently they come in ordered by their DMX address. You could reverse the order by just hitting the column heading, or you could order them by RDM unique identifier numbers. These are the serial numbers on the chips, similar to nLight serial numbers. Now, in this, they don't make much sense, and in a new venue where you are doing RDM for the first time, almost all the lights are going to be patched at DMX1. They're just going to be factory defaulted. The Lambda tile came patched as 16 3-channel, 3-slot RGB fixtures, which made it useful as a test tool. But what would it look like if they were all patched at DMX1? So let me just revert it to what it might look like in default. So I just held the first one, held down shift and hit the last one, and I can see the properties here. The DMX start address varies. Let's just change them all to 1. That would be just like the factory default. Send off all those transactions, and now all of these guys are going to respond to DMX1. So rather than using an nLight output or a Cognito, let's use a built-in tool in Pathscape. So you go to the Tools menu and you open up the Virtual Console. Now this is what the Virtual Console looks like. Currently it's idle. It's sending out my Ethernet port. It's going to send streaming ACN, which will then get converted by the output port of the device to DMX. And it is outputting the pathway secure streaming ACN, pathway SSACN, which is what our device is ready to set up to. And I'm going to output on universe 1. So let's just start the DMX, and is already highlight number 1 of the 512 slots. So if I put that to full, what you see here is all 16 lights responding to DMX1. Great. So I can then take that to 0, and if I red, green, let's just highlight blue and throw that to full. There they all are in blue, and let me release that. And if we went to slot 4, nothing happens because nobody is addressed there. So now the question is, how do we make sense of which one is which? So RDM has a required property called identify. Every device must identify or curtsy when asked. And that is done not through DMX, but through the RDM. It's a request. The light will do it, respond with a acknowledgement saying that it's doing it. So we could highlight any one of these guys here and turn on the identify control. And then we get a green flashing LED. Now it's kind of boring to hit identify and then hit send each time. So if you go under the device menu, there is an auto identify, which will be marked with a check when it's on. And then every time you change the selection, a different light will be identifying. So you might have some paperwork like an Excel spreadsheet to identify the start addresses of where the lights may be, and then go through and find the guy in the top left and then give it number 1, and then you find its friend, just the guy to its right. Let me keep going, hunting. I didn't find it there, so go up to the top. And there he is, and then that would be DMX4. So now if I bring up intensity number 4, we're going to get red on that fixture. And you would carry on going through all 16 of these. Now, I have saved this show file, so I'm just going to restore what I have. And it's going to remember all the addresses, and I can send them all off. And then now we have a nice DMX sort order again. And now if I down arrow through it, I should go left to right, top to bottom. There we go. So everything looks in order. So now let's work with some of the other properties. In this case, I want to look at the DMX personality. So we could now turn off identify so that green light's not flashing at us. And we've selected number 1 here. And all of them right now are in 3-channel RGB mode. So that would be red, green, blue, and then repeated red, green, blue. I'm going to select number 1 here, and I'm going to change it into hue saturation value. And let's send that transaction off. And that's changed the personality of this light. So now if I go to my virtual console and I bring up hue to full, nothing happens because I didn't bring in my saturation or value. So let's take saturation to full, and let's take the value to full. Now we have red, and is coincidentally red. A hue of 255 is. Now if I just roll this guy down, you see it's going to go through the entire rainbow all the way back to red. So we start at red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, red. Now one of the other neat things about RDM is sensor values. So if I scroll down, I highlight one of the devices and I scroll down to RDM sensor properties, I see that these lighting fixtures have 4 properties that they respond to. There's one called soft button, voltage, light, temperature. Now these little tiny components on here are a voltage sensor, a light sensor, and a temperature sensor. Now I'm not going to put a match up to this thing to change the temperature, but I could bring up my cell phone here, and if I bring it close to this guy, you will actually see the light go right up to full, or well, 1968 lux. If I back off a bit, it gets a bit dimmer, and if I take things away, it goes completely dark. The other sensor that will give immediate feedback is the soft button. Touch this thumbprint, and you'll see the soft button goes from 0 to 1, and the red LED comes on. Touch the button again, and it goes off. So that's a very quick overview of RDM personality setting, RDM addressing, and RDM sensor views. While we're in looking at the tools that Pathscape has, I want to introduce you quickly to one other one that is not really related to RDM, but it's right here. It's under DataScope, and you can look at different protocols: ArtNet, ShowNet, Pathport, Streaming ACN, or Pathway SSACN. We see a grid again of 512 data slots. And if I go to the virtual console and I turn on an effect to raise and lower channel 1, then you can actually see that here. Or you could look at it in a white grid like this, or in an RGB grid like this, and then it will be the same as you see on the tile. So even if you don't have the test tile and you want to monitor somebody's sources, you can see them here. The other thing is you can graph things. So if I say universe 1, slot 1, so looking at different effects, that's the sine wave, of course. And then I could do linear, and it will go up and down. Now all of that was coming from my virtual console here, universe 1. I could also activate the DMX snapshot, and then it comes in my nPWDMX as a separate source here, and it shows what's going on with its lights. We open up Cognito PC, we get yet another control. So now we can look at this, and we can look at that, and we can look at this. And if I plug in my DMX connector from a console, I get yet another source. So there it is there. And we can see what it's up to, but on the tile, it's actually merging all of these sources because they're all at the same priority. So the DataScope is a wonderful tool for seeing what is on your network and what it would look like in real life. If you wanted to actually see what it looked like here, you could right click and you can say view DMX on the port. You will get a number grid, which you can see in decimal, hexadecimal, or percentages. You will see a white grid, and you can opt to see the RGB grid. So these are all great tools that come with Pathscape, so use them to your advantage. I hope you've enjoyed this series on the nPWDMX Snapshot Controller. I am Robert Bell from Pathway Connectivity Solutions.